Rachel, and today I'm going to show you how to make a twisted cord. I'm making one probably smaller than you would in reality, but I've only got this space to work with. So I've just taken 1.5 meters of our cheeky chunky yarn, and I'm going to put a knot in the middle of it like so. And then over here, I've just got one of my craft boxes, and I've just got a bulldog clip on the top of it. And I'm just going to pop that yarn over the bulldog clip because I need some tension on it. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to start twisting this yarn round and round. Can you see? It's starting to look like that. Okay. So we just keep going. You can press fast forward now, because it may take me a little while. Not that long though, in all reality. Just have a cup of tea. Have a cup of tea while you're watching. You'll be fine. So I'm just keeping going round and round. I'm just taking both pieces just round and round. And what I'm looking is, can you see it's starting to twist back on itself? We want it to twist back on itself a lot. So let's keep going. We use this pattern or this twisted cord on our Santa sack and a few other projects. And it's just quite a good skill to have in your crafting toolkit. When you want a cord that looks a little bit fancy, this is an easy cord for you to make. And of course, you can make it with any type of yarn. You might want to use, more strands, or you might want to use, you could use different colours. You could use thinner yarn. Can you see? It's starting to curl back, but we need it to curl back more than that. So I'm just going to keep going round and round and round and round. In reality, though, this doesn't take a long time compared to how much time you would have taken to knit your Santa sack. This is one of the final touches that you'll use, and it doesn't take that long. When you're making a long one, what you might want to do is hang this over a door hook, because you'll have pieces that are longer, I imagine, that you'll be working with, so that might be easier. But this is just for the purposes of this video. So let's have a look where we're going now. So it's pretty much going back on itself now, and I feel quite confident that that's going to make what I want to make. So I'm just going to take it off, and I'm just going to hold that little loop on my finger, and then I'm just going to twist, just going to get this cord and just let it work itself out. Just run your fingers up and down it a few times, and if you can see, it's now making this lovely, lovely cord. How cool is that? I really like that. Just looks like. There we go. So to finish this, what you need to do is just take the ends, the working ends, and just tie a loop in it, because we don't want it to go anywhere else. We don't want it to unravel. So we'll just tie a loop there. And then if you've made one for your Santa sack, you'll then tie a loop in the other end.
Good morning, everybody. This is Alex St. John, aka The Saint, streaming to you live from the Playcast Dungeon. It's 3:27 in the morning, and if I haven't lost 99% of my viewers by now, just wait till you hear the rest of this video. I bet you're wondering what I'm going to talk about today. Well, believe it or not, that is related. So, I wrote, I did the, sorry, not wrote, well, not writing. Who writes anymore? Writing. We got video. Um, So I wrote the. No, I didn't write. I didn't write anything. Sorry, it's still 2 a.m. and I haven't had my coffee yet, and I can't get any for a bit until the family wakes up. Um, I did the Microsoft layoff article, got a bunch of new subscribers, so I crossed 500 subscribers. I'm halfway to 1,000 people after doing this for God knows how long and how many episodes. And I got somebody new, a new subscriber, doesn't hasn't watched all the brilliant content on my channel yet. Please do go back and you'll figure out what the my origin story is if you go back a bit. But one of the new subscribers is reasonably, asked, "Is this a science channel?" Is this a science channel? Ah, good. I don't know. Is it a science channel? So I found myself contemplating that, and on the one hand, I was somewhat offended. On the other hand, I was kind of flattered. Yes, this is a science channel, and I'm a computer scientist. All right. So, what's on my mind this evening? Actually, is this a science channel? I go, what's funny about this is that um, the whole YouTube thing, I'm not always sure how to approach it because I'm actually an entrepreneur, CEO of a technology company. Playcast is we're making consumer media and gaming technology. So some of you come to the channel and are confused and go, "Is this an ad for something?" Yeah, sure it is. Yeah, of course it's everything is an ad on the internet. Come on. Um, but the other thing that I talk about a lot for some reason is science. So, those of you who are here and are gamers and love GPUs know that, my background, to the extent that I'm interesting at all, is probably because I made your DirectX gaming operating system 30 years ago. So, myself and a couple of friends created the DirectX OS, which is the operating system for the DirectX box. Now, some of you think that Windows is the OS for the Xbox, and Windows is a gaming OS, but that was not true for a long, long time. Um, we were Microsoft employees, and we made a kind of sidecar, symbiotic co-OS just for playing games in the 90s. Gave it to game developers, and what it did is if you installed a DirectX game on Windows, basically it shut down Windows, ran the game, and then put Windows back when you left the game. So people thought, oh, in the 90s, when Windows 95 came out, they're like, oh, Microsoft made Windows play games. But no, Windows was too clunky and slow and cumbersome with, enterprise garbage to play games. It was a hopeless case. The way we got Windows to play games is by turning it off. However, this wasn't necessarily going to be the most successful marketing message for Microsoft as the Windows OS company. Um, so it was never really publicly stated or acknowledged that DirectX wasn't exactly the Windows OS. It was sort of a weird symbiotic organism made by some rogue engineers and shipped to game developers without without absolute authority to do that. um, 30 years later, Windows got re architected to sit essentially on top of DirectX so that all your modern Windows operating systems, graphics, UI, sound, video playback is all built on top of DirectX or the DirectOX OS today. But for many, many years, they were separate, symbiotic co operating systems, if you will, for gaming. And I tell, go back and watch all the episodes I've done in the past because they're still they're timeless content about the history of all of that and how it came about. But one of the things I've mentioned a lot is the strange career path I had that brought me to a place where I got to make Windows a gaming operating system. And that's because I wasn't really interested in it at all. I mean, sure, as a kid, I liked games. Actually, I liked cracking games or hacking the security off floppy disks a lot better than I liked playing them. So playing the games was marginally interesting, but cracking their DRM, that was the best game ever for me when I was a kid. Um, I was the kid with a box of floppy disks with cracked games I could sell you for $1 when I was, a teenager. which was a really long time ago. So is this a science channel? Well, the weird thing is that, I ended up at Microsoft in the 1990s as the publishing evangelist by weird and circuitous routes. But when the opportunity came to work on making Windows a gaming operating system, and we produced the Direct 3D API, which gave rise to all your modern GPUs. Contrary to popular belief, it wasn't OpenGL, um, not directly anyway. Uh, and gave rise to all your modern GPUs, such that all modern game consoles are DirectX gaming consoles, even if they're running Linux. Because the chips that used to be custom made by the Japanese console makers all got replaced by US PC Microsoft Direct 3D defined GPU architectures. All graphics chips, render triangles as polygons today rather than quads as Nvidia would have had it in their early days had Microsoft not standardized the 3D graphics industry on triangles as a, primitive. Um, so the funny thing was that the reason I happened to be at Microsoft at a time and place when I got the opportunity to go, hey, we got to add 3D to the Windows OS, and to support gaming, we have to do something crazy in hardware architecture that doesn't exist and isn't possible as far as anybody knows. We're going to make a 3D driver API that enables Windows to talk to arbitrary generic 3D hardware and render games and graphic scenes in real time. It was a crazy revolutionary thing going on in tech in that era in the 90s. And the idea that consumers could render real time 3D on cheap consumer graphics cards and that they would come down from the lofty world of $100,000 SGI workstations was kind of unthinkable. And so back in the day when we made the decision to create Direct 3D, and I got the opportunity, my friends and I said, we got to go buy a 3D company, and I went and did the due diligence and identified Rendermorphics, a British uh, R&D company working on real-time 3D engines for gaming, and had Microsoft acquire them, moved the British Direct 3D engineers to the US, and created the Direct 3D graphics system, which, again, is all of your modern game consoles. On all operating systems. um, so the weird thing about that story is you go, okay, so I'm kind of well known as a graphics guy, well known as a 3D gaming guy, because I caused that revolution when I was at Microsoft 30 years ago. And I've been working on consumer media and tech ever since. But one of the things you'll notice is that, of course, people want to hear about those stories about how GPUs got made, the early relationship with NVIDIA and ATI, later acquired by AMD, how the early graphics chips architecture, working with all the early game developers like Peter Molyneux and Alexei Pajitnov, the creator of Tetris. I brought him to the U.S. So if you watch the Tetris movie, you know that Alexei got a pretty rough shake from Russia after creating Tetris, and Microsoft got him out of Russia and relocated to the U.S. So I got Alexei hired and moved to Microsoft, where he produced a whole generation of Microsoft consumer casual games in the early 2000s. I got to work with Mike Morhaime back when Blizzard was just making 2D little Viking games for DOS, and persuaded him that he should try launching Diablo on the new Windows 95 OS because, it might be a lot more successful as a Windows game than as a DOS game. And, well, he's a billionaire now. I worked with John Carmack and ported Doom, so forth. But the irony of all of that is that actually I'm a strange kind of scientist. I consider myself a computational physicist. And so my interest in gaming and consumer media actually comes from a huge interest in physics and biology, which is what I'm actually much more educated in. And my interest in computers started with an interest in going, hey, can I use this computer to understand life? Can I use it to understand physics? So as a you know, we because I was a weird kid, but still am, right? I said I'm gonna try to figure out. I'm fascinated with computers because fascinated with their ability as a tool to help me understand science. And so when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time thinking a lot about how to use a computer to simulate living systems. And I was, yeah, interested in artificial intelligence, right? The idea of creating a brain. But pretty early on, all the discussion about artificial intelligence was the odd idea to me that we're gonna brains, they think they're smart. That's what we are. We think we are a brain. We're gonna sort of try to use the idea of computing to, and even to go just sort of directly simulate neurons. And if we directly simulate neurons and have enough computers, one day we'll simulate a brain and it'll think like us, and we'll make computers that think like us. And all of that train of thinking, which was really, really popular and deeply entrenched in academia in like the 70s when I started programming, didn't make any damn sense to me. It didn't make any damn sense to me for a number of reasons. One, you go, the brain kind of needs the rest of us to work. And so identifying just the brain in isolation from the rest of the system as being analyzable for its intelligence troubled me. And the other thing that bothered me a lot about going is the question of, well, if I can simulate a brain, I'm going to understand consciousness and thought and all kinds of great things. Sure. But the thing that bothered me about that idea is you go, but a brain isn't made by a brain. It's not like humans reproduce by going, "Hey, honey, let's have kids. Let's get together and manufacture two half brains and stick them together, and then we'll figure out the rest later." Um, and it's not like we are consciously aware of going, "Hey, babe, let's have kids. How do you want to design their brain? Let's get some blueprints and pencils and figure it out." It's not really how reproduction works. Really, the brain, the thing that understands how to manufacture a brain is a cell. And we start with one of them. Not totally true, but just not. I know most people think that, but we just start with, and a fertilized egg is the one cell I'm talking about, right? And you go, somehow it's actually a fertilized egg, a single cell that has everything it needs to know how to assemble a brain and all that other stuff we like to pretend isn't important or interesting, just in the rest, the brain and the rest. Um, and that cell knows how to do that. And I go, wow, brain seems really complicated and unfathomable. And a large macroscopic system seems like if you try, and how practical is it to use a brain to understand a brain? It's kind of like trying to put a bigger cup inside a smaller one, right? You're gonna use is if I'm if you start with the basic premise of artificial intelligence, and you'd hear, and I was a kid, I loved AI, I loved science, right? And I read Marvin Minsky. I bought Society of the Mind when he published it in the 70s. It was it's my bible of artificial intelligence back then. um and and just brilliant people talking about this stuff, and you go, I don't get it, because I'm not sure we're smart enough to understand our brain if the only tool we have to understand it with is a brain, right? Sort of seems like a subset kind of problem. I go, that seems like a very odd and probably failure prone way to tackle understanding what a brain is and why it appears to have these magical properties. What's more interesting to me, actually, and what seems simpler and more approachable to me, is understanding the cell that knows how to make all that stuff. And so I go, and I'm a kid, right? I'm on my Commodore VIC 20 with a 1 kilohertz 6502 Motorola processor in the 1970s, early 80s, technically, maybe right on 80, as I recall. It's been a long time. Um, but uh, I don't have, it's going to be forever before, when Moore's law wasn't really coined at that point, so we didn't know that was going to be a thing exactly. But it's going to be a long time, maybe longer than I'm going to live before I have a computer that could even potentially simulate a brain. Um, so that what if I make that my career ambition, my raison d'être, I might die of old age before ever having a computer powerful enough to explore the ideas I'm interested in. Seems overwhelming and too hard. What if we just tackle something simple in life science with a computer? What if we just start with understanding or simulating a cell? What if we just said, let's simulate a paramecium or an amoeba? Let's make that our goal. Because if we could simulate a fertilized human egg cell, just that, and then you had a big enough computer, theoretically, you should be able to grow that thing up into a brain and everything else, and all the other stuff that isn't interesting to intelligence for some reason. Don't need any of that other stuff. Don't need to understand it. Um, so when you get a when so what if we just get, okay, maybe if I live long enough and I'm lucky, I'll see computers arrive one day where we can simulate one cell, one fertilized egg cell. Ah, crap. You know, I guess even growing a human baby from a cell, well, we're kind of recursive. We have the whole chicken and the egg problem. So I kind of have to simulate a whole person in order to gestate a simulated egg in order to grow a brain. Damn it. So I can't use a human egg cell to simulate growing a human brain because we're freaking recursive. All right, I need an egg cell for an animal that doesn't require the entire other animal to reproduce. Well, again, the nice thing about focusing on cells is that that amoeba can just go boop, done, two of them. Perfect. A lot. So the medium, the environment, the universe I have to simulate is a lot simpler for an amoeba or a single celled organism than it is for growing entire mammalian organisms that require entire planetary environmental systems in order for us to exist. So every time you try to go, well, I'm going to try to simplify the problem of understanding artificial intelligence by growing one cell in a computer, you end up needing the entire universe to simulate it and even to just contain the thing. Damn it, that's not a good place to start. Well, all right, let's just grow cells maybe in the simplest environment that we know they can put, yeast in water with a little sugar. um, and so I was obsessed with those ideas for a while. And as a kid, I was going, okay, well, all right, as a life ambition, I want to learn to understand life and how it grows brains and intelligence. Um, by simulating the simplest form of life I possibly can simulate. Well, what do I need to know? Ah, well, gotta understand some quantum mechanics stuff. Gonna have to understand simulating water on a computer at a chemical level. Water that life lives in is actually highly doped with all sorts of other chemicals and things for handling electricity and carrying nutrients, and so forth. So you gotta get all that biology working, and then you got to simulate the chemistry and all the molecules that make up a cell. What's the smallest freaking cell you can find? Probably it's something like a yeast, right? So I go, okay, well, you're gonna need quantum mechanics. You're gonna need to understand how to simulate quantum mechanics on a computer. I'm gonna dedicate myself to that for the rest of my life. That's what I'm gonna figure out. So by the time I was a teenager and was frustrated by the limitations of the little toy Commodore 64 I could get back in that era, um, I was fascinated by SIGGRAPH conference and the idea that that there was a whole study going on, whole conferences dedicated to the science of using computers to study and simulate molecular chemistry, protein folding, light, electromagnetism interacting with atoms. And so in order to, and I said, that's, I was homeschooled in a log cabin for a lot of my life, so didn't have much of a formal education. So I wanted to learn all the magic math and equations and science, and didn't have a formal education, so I delivered pizza to send myself to SIGGRAPH conferences. And then I attended SIGGRAPH and would study CGI. which again wasn't an interest in making movies or games at that time. I was interested in simulating light interacting with molecules, um, quantum mechanics. And I remember back in that era, before I, managed to learn all the math, really struggling with it, buying college textbooks and pouring through it, buying biology books and pouring through it, trying to understand what I needed to simulate a living system. Um, and it seemed hard, seemed like the sort of thing that would be a great life's work, a real possible to achieve in a lifetime with a huge amount of work and focus, but not insurmountable. That's what it naively seemed like to me when I was a kid. So I became a CGI expert, which was turned out to create your modern gaming GPUs and which are and also the modern movie industry by virtue of being interested in physics simulation with computers and light simulation. So it just happened that that turned out to be a good way to make a living when I was at Microsoft in my 20s a few years later. Um, and that's how that came about. So even though I'm up here talking to everybody about gaming and consumer media technology and GPUs a lot of the time, that's actually and it's funny because you go, hey, I mean, if you want to understand GPUs and what they're doing, and you're trying to understand artificial intelligence, really, well, I'm the guy who made that stuff, right? And the funny thing is, people go, "Oh, you read Snow Crash and blah blah blah." I know. If for ordinary people who have ordinary lives, it's hard to know it when you meet somebody who's really odd, really unusual. And so it's funny when people don't believe you, right, or don't know that that's what happened in the game industry, is that somebody who was an interest in biology and physics simulation inadvertently, caused a gaming revolution at Microsoft with his other crazy friends. Um, and the dynamics of that has been fascinating to me ever since, because considered games fun, but trivial distractions. I didn't want to waste time playing them, but I was fascinated by the idea of making them, because you're using a computer to make universes, to make living things. You're simulating people and monsters and our various life forms. You're simulating environments. And the more powerful the audio and the physics simulation and the lighting calculations and the AI models went into a game, the more interesting thing they became. So making what we think of as modern video games went hand in hand with a primal abiding passion for ideas of trying to understand how to use computers to simulate life. So I am a scientist. I'm a weird one, but a scientist. Um, and so the point that's funny is, whole generations of kids grow up wasting their time playing video games, which are incredible, massively sophisticated simulations of physics and light and artificial intelligence for entertainment worth billions. And then suddenly 30 years later, it's I love the media, the way everybody talks about it. They go, "Oh my God, these GPUs are coming to life. They're artificially intelligent. Oh my God, who knew?" Right? I did. That's what they're fucking for, all you idiots. That was what they were always for. We just had to start somewhere. And so it's really funny having everybody just acting like they discovered artificial intelligence and that who knew GPUs could be used for that. And we all did. We made them for that on purpose. That's what they were for. The ideas, the parallel computing, the ability to simulate complex physical systems, all was the purpose. They found commercial focus for it in gaming. Um, and the people, Jensen Huang and the ATI, the ATI story is more complicated. If you go and see my interview with Ken Nicholson, you can actually get the very earliest origin story of how ATI, now AMD, really entered the GPU business. Where did the generation of AMD GPUs come from? Um, but the Nvidia story is much better known, and it's a better story, right? It's got a great founder, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates kind of character in it all, which makes it a much better adventure story. AMD's entry into the GPU business was a little more chaotic and boring to tell. Um, so anyway, the point is that my passion for science is what made me the gaming guy. And I still love making gaming and media technology precisely because what I'm always doing is studying computational simulation of living systems with the primitive, crappy computers I still stuck with today. And a lot of what you'll find me ranting about here is my frustration with why computers still suck at the things I think that they would be good at by now. And at the same time, how amazing it is that the things they got incredible at, I never thought I'd get have the computing power in my lifetime to play with, right? I mean, nothing entertains me more than talking to Chat GPT and coding with it and thinking, I just spent 100,000 kilowatts on something my brain could solve on a tablespoon of sugar. Can of Coke will code this up just as well as the giant freaking data center power the shovels of coal I just burned to answer this basic coding question. Um, the point is that when I started working in gaming and graphics, right? The one of the things that I did that I was quite ashamed of is I learned all the real simulation of light, physics, ray tracing, and it's called a physical based rendering, or the real way to the correct way to math light together, the physics way. And the problem is it's too slow for gaming, too slow for being cheap, too expensive. It was never You're never going to have gaming GPUs if the gaming GPUs were actually doing real physics initially. So we had to come up with an entirely fake simplification of physics that was renderable for games that looked great, looked real, but was totally not the science of light at all. And so in some strange way, we had to achieve a sort of mastery of an understanding of the effect or the mathematics that caused the world to look and work the way it does, and discard all the actual way reality computed it, because that was too slow and cumbersome. Um, and so, in some sense, the great achievement of modern computer graphics and CGI was actually having such deep insight into the nature of why the world looks the way it does to our eyes, independently of how the universe computes it, and then going, okay, we'll just throw the universe away and make something cheap and quick that fools the eye just as well as all of creation does. But we can compute it with these little toy computers we have. So that's practical. We don't need a whole damn universe to fool your eyeballs. That turns out to be simple once you understand it, right? And that's what I always hoped would happen in artificial life, that we'd go, just all the physics and quantum mechanics and mysterious quantum entanglement, teleporting fucking atoms at the quantum level, trying to understand all that stuff and even think about simulating it. I'll just never have a computer that can do that. And the more I understood the physics, the more obvious it was we'll never have a computer that'll do it. Um, or not in my lifetime, and that's the only span of time I'm interested in solving the problem in, right? So I became quite disillusioned with that problem because it became very disappointed to realize that I'd never have the computing power, even just to simulate a paramecium in real time. When you get down at that level and you look at the trillions of molecules interacting at incredibly high speeds, and the incredible number of dimensions in which physics operates at that level to compute living systems, you just go, oh, God, it's hopeless. And when you actually get a view of how complex the machinery in even one little bacterium is, even that's unfathomable. And then you get down to going, that's just as big a mess as figuring out how the brain is. It's so complicated. There still has to be something simpler. Is there something simpler I can relate to that I could compute that doesn't need pre-mastering, biting off this? It's like, trying to eat an elephant with one bite. It's too hard. And so even what I thought was made it, the simplification of approaching understanding consciousness and living systems by using a computer to simulate something simple enough that I could tackle turned out to also be hopeless, right? And the fact, the degree to which we even approach it now, 58 years into my life, is astounding. and I'm not going to live long enough at this rate. It's never going to happen. And then you have all these morons wasting time on quantum computers, and so just the whole world of self-important geniuses went off the cliff in a stupid direction, and I'm gonna die of old age before the smart people come back and go, well, that was a stupid waste of time. What was the problem again? So quantum computing is just the biggest, dumbest, dead end diversion and computer science, human history, and you just go, oh God, I'm just never going to get to see the day when I get the computing and power the way I want it. And so in that context, I went, okay, I got to simplify. Can I get to lower? Can I get to something I can wrap my head around? I go, okay, maybe it can't tackle the whole freaking cell and the cytosome and all the crystals and all the organelles and mitochondria and the electrical, right? Is there anything? Can I find something in there? And I got down to just the structure of DNA and RNA itself and the way it's transcribed and the way it's computing, and I found something. I found something made it go, oh, this is approachable. And the funny thing is, remember, I'm coming to it, it's a weird thing to come to go. I've got a fascination in biology, which, if you're trying to simulate it, is also a fascination with physics. And I want to use computers to do it. So it's a computer scientist mentality to biology. And I finally, and this was many, many years ago, that I found this hook that I went, oh, this is something I can work with. This is something I'll have a computer that might help me understand life and might compute something really interesting and valuable in my lifetime that'll provide profound insight into the nature of how a brain really works. Um, and what consciousness really is and that kind of thing, and how you could really simulate it without a bunch of your 125 IQs out there muddying the waters for all the time with their bullshit papers. So you get down to the very level of DNA transcription and gene sequencing, and lo and behold, there's a funny thing. um, and so I'm going to try to take you down there. I wish I had a whole CGI thing I could do this with, but I got a day job. So I'm going to have to use words to communicate and hope that they're good enough. You get way down to the machinery of life, and there are the way the way genes themselves compute. In there somewhere, there's a computer, but it's not like ours. And the way it is like ours, the way it's not like ours, is really fascinating to me. And let me see if I can find, let me show you something that I find riveting. And you will too, hopefully, when I'm done here. So let's see if I can get this on the screen here. Let me see here, get size things around. Oop, yeah, there we go. All right. Amino acids. Hold on. If I didn't, that's why I played the yarn video at the beginning. I'll come back to what that was about. Trust me, it ties to all of this. I just had to lose all the idiots first before we went here, because it's just, I got to have an elite subscriber base of 500 of the smartest people on the internet who are the only people who listen to my channel, because I'm way over anybody else's head. And, if I talk for more than 15 minutes, everybody else has a short attention span. So we had to use the yarn video just to cull the noisy ones first to get down to the people who are really interested in deep analytical discussions and explorations of science, if you will. So got down to this here. So, if you don't remember your high school biology, you go, oh, we're made of DNA, computes us somehow. Well, and how does that work? Well, there's a computer program that this DNA represents. Well, what do you mean? Well, in DNA's the chain of DNA is made out of things called codons, and codons are little pairs of molecules that group, right. You have your what is it, CG and TA, uh, uh, and uracil and RNA, but the human DNA uses thymine, I think, um, that that these tiny molecules are encoded in the DNA in pairs of twos. And so a codon, which is just a little genetic sequence that is encodes in your DNA the amino acid so you're made of proteins. Human body's made of about 100,000 different proteins. We have about 30,000 genes in our DNA that code for those 100,000 proteins somehow. Also, why I'm so interested in compression, because the human genome and encoding of DNA, it's compressed. So evolution invented compression. Interesting observation, but another discussion. Um, and so the codons in human DNA are sequences of little pairs, base pairs, and they come in little tuplets of twos, and there are three of them to code for each amino acid. Now, how many amino acids are there? Well, there are 21 amino acids. And why is sorry? There are kind of 20 traditionally recognized amino acids, and then there's the other one. Um, and we'll talk about that in a second. So you're made of 100,000 proteins. A protein is made of a chain of amino acids, and there are 21 amino acids that make up a protein. And those proteins are encoded with codons of three of these pairs of CG and TA, molecules. Um, and since there are pairs, they can come in two orientations, right? They can be upside right or upside down, and there's three of them. So they're 4 to the 3rd, or that's 4 bits of encoding data. 0 to 63 numbers is what human DNA encodes. So your DNA literally encodes a number space, and the human genome, all life's genome, mostly, is encoded with 4 bits, 4-bit assembly language. So we actually our DNA encodes a program that is us, and here the analogy is pretty tight. Not I'm not making a crazy association between Turing machine-based, von Neumann machine-based computing and the way life computes. Right here, where it's kind of DNA is a program. It's made of 21 amino acids, represented by 4 bits of encoding data, and each of these 4 bits encodes for some amino acids. Well, right off the bat is a very interesting, weird observation that computer scientists notice quickly about DNA, where you go, well, why are there 60? Why can DNA encode for 64 possible amino acids when there are only 21? Um, What's with the other encoding space? Why is life 4 bits? If I had, let's see, 2 bits would encode for 16 amino acids, right? Or excuse me, did I say that right? Yep, 3 bits would give me 32 amino acids. So why aren't we just 3 bits, right? Well, weirdly, these codons, because they're in pairs, you have to have so we're base 4. So for some reason, biology requires base 4. Base 2 encoding doesn't chemically work. That's the short answer. So you either got to be 4 bits. We either had to be 4 bits or 8 bits, which is still 4 bits because you'd still use the same amino acids. So it turns out that to the extent that we understand life at all, the life that we are made of is, chemically 4-bit encoding for this kind of alien life that we are works. It was able to chemically actually function. Um, but then you go, okay, there are 21 amino acids. Well, why are there 64? Why are there 4 bits? Why 64 encodings? What about why the extra encoding space? Why can't life get by without an extra bit? Um, and so the interesting thing about that is you go, well, your amino acids, which make up all the proteins that make you, um, are redundantly encoded in your genome. So if you look at, let me see, what do we have here? If you look, this is a table so remember I told you there are 3 codons. So the first base is, and remember they come in 2 orientations, right? So TA and CG pair with each other, and you can have a AT or a TA. So they can either be flipped or not. And then you can have the other pair, which is CG or GC, and they can be flipped. So that gives you 4 bits effectively, just to keep it simple. And you go, well, if the first symbol can either be a T, a C, an A, or a G. The second base across the top can be a TCA or G, and the third base can be a TCA or G. So if you organize the codons in a table like this, which is kind of the way the life arranges its computer bits, um, you go, well, and then you map the amino acids to them. So here's the table of amino acids, and you go, boy, this is really hugely over encoded over here. Look at this. So here we have valine here, 1, 2, 3, 4 redundant encodings um, for it. If we get to where's tryptophan, let me see here. Tryptophan, Thanksgiving turkey. There it is. There's only one here, TGG. Only one. And why is that? Well, evolution, right, said, hey, some of these amino acids are really fundamental and essential to making all kinds of things essential to life. And if you screw them up, if you misencode them, you die. Life doesn't work. So, amino acids that are used biologically in great abundance for all kinds of purposes in proteins have a lot of encodings in order to make them error resistant. So, notice that all the encodings for this amino acid are simple base pair mutations of each other. And the purpose of that, you go, the first 2 letters, the first 2 pairs have to be the same, GT, but you can get any possible combination of the third codon still will encode for the same amino acid. And that's designed to say, well, when I'm synthesizing a protein out of RNA, messenger RNA that's encoding this, I'm transcribing it into a protein, and I'm reading the program. If I screw it up, if there's mutations or there's errors in it, I'm still going to get the same protein and not kill you, right? And so here another one. These proteins here are also really critical to living systems, and these also tend to be the oldest amino acids. So, however life evolved in its primordial form before it settled on 21 amino acids, um, said these are the first amino acids that are going to get used a lot for some mysterious reason. And if you get them wrong, it kills you. So we're going to use lots of redundant encoding, and they're all similar so that they can withstand mutation during synthesis, during protein synthesis. So if there's an error in the sewing machine building you up in one base pair, you'll still get the correct amino acid, and you'll get a functioning protein and will live despite there being these errors. Second, even if the error is in another neighboring pair, see this error is here all in this section, see that? But even if the error is over here on the left side, you still get chemically similar amino acids. So amino acids can be organized in a number of dimensions of chemical properties: acidic, not acidic, hydrophobic, hydrophilic, etc. And so when you arrange the various chemical properties of the amino acids, what you also find is that the ones that are chemically similar to each other, even if you get a double mutation and miss the error encoding, you can land on an amino acid that, if substituted, will still produce a protein that works as intended. Maybe not quite as well, but enough not to kill you. And so there's a huge amount for critical systems and critical amino acids in the body. Nature, evolution has assigned more error correction to it. Now, hold on. You think, if I needed a biology class, why did I listen to this? Don't worry, it gets fascinating any minute here, because I know you're all waiting to understand what the yarn video has to do with this. So once you realize, this amazing organization of this encoding space, but it also reminds me of something else, because remember I told you I worked on compression a lot, and we know that nature has compressed as encrypted or compressed or not encrypted. That's not the right way to say it. Has compressed our biology. There are 30,000 genomes roughly that encode for 100,000 different proteins somehow. Our genome is compressed somehow. Um, and so the other interesting thing about this arrangement is that remember I said that these amino acids that are vital to life, well, if you get them wrong, it kills you. But meaning being vital for life also means that you have to produce them in greater abundance or rapidly. So when you think about all the chemicals, all the types of proteins your cell has to manufacture to make you and keep you alive, it has to produce higher volumes of these essential amino acids at faster rates because these are critical to living systems. And so, in order to synthesize amino acids faster and in parallel, the body just says, well, they're just more valid ways to encode them because that can increase the rate at which DNA can manufacture them. So the other indication that these particular amino acids over here on the left side are particularly vital to life is that not only do they have greater resistance to mutation, but they also or greater protection against mutation, but this organization also provides more ways for the DNA to encode them and provides which supports accelerated encoding and transcription of these messenger RNAs because there are more valid encodings for them in your DNA. And those have various purposes, which I'll talk about in a minute. So you go, oh, so, I'm a programmer. I used to code in assembly language. And this feels like a kind of assembly language to me. This is really relatable. I feel like I could write a program that did this. Wait for it. If only it were that simple. But this seems like I can simulate this on a computer. It's a program. This is a language. And also this looks a little bit like a Huffman encoding table in compression too. Now, remember, I pointed out over here tryptophan here. Nobody gives a shit about tryptophan. Just doesn't matter. It's a newer amino acid, got incorporated later in life. So higher order mammals make more use of it than your primitive life forms, and that's pretty disposable. It's a throwaway one. So something that helps regulate sleep, which isn't something cells give a shit about, but high order mammals evolved a tendency to sleep. So something about our sleep patterns, which are a much later product of mammalian evolution. Yeah, you can take your tryptophan or you can leave it. If you screw it up, apparently it's not a disaster. Um, so we'll just have one encoding for that. Well, remember I kept coughing on the one point, right? Which is, you go, well, then why do I keep coughing and see it's 21 amino acids? Well, because you go, okay, so if there's 20 amino acids, and that gives you roughly 3 different encodings per amino acid, although evolution doesn't really sort them exactly that way. Well, let me see, 3 times 20 is 60, right? And but I've got 4 more encodings left. Well, you have to say I need to indicate the end of the program. The famous Turing problem, which is when is the protein done? How do you tell the ribosome that is stitching these proteins together to snip and start a new protein? Well, that's stop. So you need a stop bit. But weirdly, there's another stop bit, couple stop bits over here. And look, see, it's tag, TAG, TGA, and TAA, right? And did I get it wrong? No, I swear it's CGTA. Yeah. So this sequence, tells you to stop transcoding. And weirdly, it looks like tryptophan, sleep, borrowed, one of the slots for the fourth slot for stop somehow. So, we'll speculate about that, but you need something to say end of program. So you have a stop bit. And this matrix is quite fascinating. So you go, oh, it sounds like assembly language. However, when you make a computer program in assembly language, there is really no relationship for between each encoding and the other. They're not ordered in any of the assembly language. A human might have made the assembly language and ordered the instructions alphabetically because that was easier for the human to organize. But this assembly language here, the relationship and the transcripting risk of transcoding between them really matters, and the redundancy and how it's ordered really matters. So this is an assembly language that's a little unlike a human computer program or assembly language because we make our computers, if any bit is wrong, they just crash, and that's the end, and blue screen to death, and that's gone. So human made computers are incredibly fragile because there isn't any of that. We just said we're just gonna fire Intel if they ever make a 40 trillion, transistor chip that has a single bit flip out of place ever. Um, just that we can't cope with that. Just screw it, blow up the machine, blue screen. So our computer languages aren't intended to function like living systems. We just beat any possibility of an error out of them. So the human mentality to making a computer was to just go, that's complicated. Let's just not allow any errors. And so all this redundant error correction crap we shouldn't need, which turned out to be wrong, ironically. And it's all over computing, which also is fascinating because I then went on to become an error correction guy because I realized how important this idea was, but not for the reasons you'd think it was. So humans think and approach computers as things you want to compute perfectly and have no errors. And so anything that's a mutation is bad. So it causes the computer to crash, causes it to fail. And in all the biological literature I ever read years ago, it's changing a little bit now, but that's exactly how all biological discussion was about genetic mutations. Here are all the diseases they cause. Here's all the sickness these mutations cause. Here's how this mutation kills off all of these things. Um, so human beings, which are, or at least human scientists, right? Really hate mutation. It's all of life must be because there's something wrong with life. It's buggy, it's sloppy, it's messy, it's disorganized. And so all this mutating is a mess and it's a bad thing. And so there's all kinds of amazing things nature has done to not mutate. And yet because, biological systems and life is complicated, mutation still happens in spite of itself and mostly results in death and disease. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I'm trying to highlight a very human mentality, or certainly a very human scientist mentality to thinking about life. But what I realized in looking at this and thinking about how to simulate it and thinking about why is it this way? Why is it different from a simple Turing machine assembly language and encodings that don't, the order of them and their relationship to each other doesn't matter to us computer scientists. Why does it matter here? And the thing you think about a lot is you go, you know what bothers me about that entire mentality to computing and that mentality to biology is that we're alive. We believe, scientists believe, that all of our complexity and high order function and the miracle of human consciousness and large, life forms on a planet that's mostly made of bacterium is the result of mutation and natural selection. And again, science always says, well, that's just nature's stupid, and mutations are bugs, and just by coincidence, some on rare occasion, you just hit the megabucks and people. Which again, I always said, I grew up in an era when creationists and scientists were really going at it each over, public school curriculum. Um, and and the funny thing is, and you'd see they'd have interviews and they'd have these really serious debates with each other over creation versus, and all of that stuff just, seemed like stupid nonsense to me. because I thought the creationists had a point. I'm a scientist. I'm a zealous scientist because I go and evolution is not a satisfactory answer to that because if you're talking about really complex systems, let's say a lottery, right, where you go, you know, think of lottery as a mutation system, right? Where you're going to produce all these mutations of a number. Everybody's going to go pay $5 to buy a number, and there's going to be millions of these numbers that are all different permutations. Every number will be unique. Will be think of it as a mutation, and only one of these mutations actually gives rise to a megabucks winner, and everything else kills you. They're all you losers. You get nothing. You get zero. You die, you lose your $5. Thank you. Come again tomorrow to buy another lotto ticket. Only one of them is valid for life. And when you look at the complexity of living system or biology and go, the only way we got here is by, you know, by constant winning of megabucks prizes. It's understandable that that would a rational mind, right, even a creationist one, would go, that doesn't make sense. That's not a satisfactory explanation. Perfectly reasonable position for them to have, I thought. The rest of it, okay, and therefore God, right? Not a very scientific one, but they're allowed to make the point that, y'all, that's a shitty explanation for how we got complicated. That's a good point, I thought. And when I read all this literature, I go, you know what it all has in common that really bothers me? Is that the assumption, the human injection of bias, that all this mutation is random and bad. And if you look at this exact same table and say, well, what if it's not to prevent mutation? What if it's to control mutation? What if the amount of redundancy of these various amino acids, because you'd go, look, here's another way to put it, right? If you go, if mutations are so effing bad, they're so effing problematic, then why only 4 bits instead of 8 or 16 or 32, right? Why don't you go, boy, we never want to die. So let's just go ahead and devote 8 bits to redundantly coding the stuff so we never get a freaking error. Um, and you go, well, 4 bits of encoding, that's not much error correction for trillions and trillions of biological amino acid productions going on every fraction of a second in a living human body. The amount of mutation going on is massive is on a massive scale, despite all of this encoding protection. We're mutating. We got to be mutating like crazy with this kind of shitty error, with this tiny, a little bit of error correction. And sure enough, we are. We're mutating at about 1% of our DNA is mutated in our. Everybody's a mutant. Everybody, by the time you adult, are not what as encoded as intended. I thought, what if I thought about it the opposite? What if you go, yeah, okay, what if this is not only a structure for preventing bad mutations? What if it's designed to intent? What if it is designed? What if it has evolved? Pick your favorite word to choose good mutations intelligently, because it also has been done to do that. Because this ordering of data, you go, not only are these things, these particular amino acids vital to life, highly redundantly encoded, they also, the nearest mutations or errors land on something that will produce usually a functionally equivalent protein that may be less efficient but won't kill you. But sometimes that mutation will produce a more efficient protein, or a protein that's useful for something else it wasn't intended for, but still viable. And you go, the body can't afford to go, I got to go, I can take big, just evolutionary lotto megabucks leap with life. They go, oh, we're going to take little incremental steps that produce a protein that may be a little less efficient, but turns out to be useful for something else we didn't know we needed. And so this is not just a table of how to prevent mutation wholesale. You would use more bits if the purpose was to stop it. This is a table that's meant to guide evolution intelligently so that when a mutation occurs, it tends for the it's think of it as a megabucks lottery that says, what we want is the minimum number of losers. So for everybody who bet $5, we kind of want to return money to the largest portion of them possible without it, we want to actually give back $5 to everybody, not just have one winner and everybody dies. Um, or it says, maybe we're willing to take some risks here. I'm willing to lose a cell here and there in order to have the possibility of a big win. A big, hey, we invented mitochondria. Boom, we're going to go kill all the prokaryotes. Sorry, a little nerd joke. We're not going to do that level of biology today. Go watch other YouTube episodes. But so biology is tuned to go, hey, there's a huge advantage to taking huge evolutionary biological leaps, but I don't want to risk killing myself running those experiments. So this is a table that's designed to support and requires a certain amount of mutation in evolution to function. Um, and then there's a weird thing you learn about biology, right? Because one of the things I, love to go on and on about mutations, but there are things, chemicals in the environment that people call mutagens, which are all bad and all cause cancer and all kill you. And so anything that's a mutagen must be bad. You hate that. We don't want anything to do with mutagens except nitric oxide, which is just fucking everywhere. And our body manufactures it as a byproduct of metabolism in the mitochondria constantly, and is the most mutagenic chemical in the body that anything exists in nature. And we just manufacture it in our cells and go do it all the time. And we take vitamins to stop it because free radicals, oh, those are going to kill you. Those are going to give you cancer. You can't have that, right? And so people talk about free radicals and mutagens like they're just cancer and going to kill you and they're the worst, and the body is just because it's just the sucking on its own exhaust pipe, churning out death internally constantly. And if you just don't exercise and eat right and take the right vitamins, well, your body's just going to mutagen itself to death. And that's common, just the whole cancer and death and just all of that. Everybody's obsessed with it. But if you look at this machinery, you go, wait a minute, that may be the wrong way to look at this. It's, you go, yeah, it's taking risks with mutations, but these are all very managed risks. This is not a reckless gambler. It's not going, hey, I'm gonna bet all my money or lose all my money and die. It's going, I got $50. I think I can afford to bet a buck and lose it. And this table reflects the areas that that animal biomes are willing to gamble with to get an evolutionary advantage, to learn a new trick to increase their survival while not risking death and failure. And so, built into this is a strategy for evolving, for learning. And so the interesting and what's fascinating is you go, well, it's really fun to look at this and go, well, sure, for humans, but we're already brilliant. But this is very close to the exact same table you'd find in a paramecium or an amoeba. Basic, same, little slightly different distribution. Got you a little your amino acids swapped around a little bit there, but essentially it's the same table, working the same way. And you go, okay, well now I'm getting happy here because I don't have to deal with a whole giant bloated human organism to try to figure out how to compute the thing. I'm back at a nice single cell world. And you go, that's just does single cells work this way? And of course you go, well, a thing we hate about disease like influenza is it just mutates. And I go, well, we don't like that because it kills us, but it's working fucking great for the virus. The virus is mutating like crazy, just spreading and surviving every vaccine we make and jumping from animal host to animal host and adapting to it. This table working freaking great. for diseases and viruses. Or viruses not. I know that viruses do not operate on this table. They were. I know they're made of RNA. Well, some of them are. Not all made of RNA. But anyway, I know that this is not conflating this with virus is not exactly fair. But same principle applies. The viral structure of a viral's encoding for proteins and RNAs still uses the same amino acids. RNAs use uracil instead of was it thymine, yeah, whatever. Um, but well, and you think I've forgotten the word? I read the books. I never talk to anybody about it. I don't sit there and recite the terminology. It's all in my own head. um, I'll talk about the why RNA and DNA use different codons for substitute for T for a U, uracil in RNA, and why big complicated animals do that. It's in order to be big and complicated. So you go, well, wait a minute. So this is not a playbook for how you perfectly encode things without errors. That's the wrong way to think about it. You understand it wrong. This is a table for how to learn. This is an AI. This is the very origin of life, down at the ribosome transcoding machinery, going all the way back to the first cell that ever existed. This was fundamental to its success at survival, is this distribution of ribosomal mappings of amino acids to codons. That's what made these cells evolve systematically and successfully. It's what made them go, oh, antibiotics, screw that. I'm going to mutate away. And now, so much for your penicillin. Now, what are you going to do to stop us from killing you? Right? And so, bacteria and viruses at the lowest, most fundamental levels are artificial intelligence machines. They're learning, they're adapting. They're learning at a chemical level about how to survive in the environment, but it's still, this is generating programs. And these programs are writing themselves. And the mutations, the probability distribution of mutations going on at this level is balancing the risk of making a mutation that kills you with the risk of making a mutation that benefits you without killing you, so that this entire system's not just going and blowing $50 on megabucks tickets. It's choosing its numbers and how much it bets very carefully and systematically to maximize its chance of learning or adapting successfully without dying. This thing is thinking. And it's a static table. There's no moving parts on this table here. This is just a probability for balancing the risk of mutations being beneficial or not. And so then, if I felt like doing it, if I have got anybody watching at this point in the video, there's fascinating papers that show that this turns out to be exactly how viruses and bacteria evolve. So they've done studies where they said, well, we're going to take a bacteria and we're going to shoot high energy particles at it to knock codons out of place, mutated on purpose. We're going to expose it to nitric oxide and cause mutations in it, and that ought to kill it. And then they show the distribution of, you'd say, well, most mutations, if mutations are all just mostly bad, mostly megabucks losing tickets, which is how everybody has traditionally thought about it, and still do to a large extent, to too much of an extent, then most of these things are going to kill the organism, and some of them are, a megabucks winner. And when they bombard cells and viruses with random radiation that causes random mutations, the result is a disproportionate number of mutations that are harmless, that don't kill the cell, and a few mutations that are beneficial, and relatively few of the random mutations caused that way kill the thing. So when you stress an organism, they tend to adapt. And you go, oh, well, but my antioxidants are pouring in my blood, and as you get older, you get inflammation. We have to have medications to prevent your inflammation because you're going to die, and blah, 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 it's going to cause cancer. Not exactly. Your body causes inflammation, releases nitric oxide, nature's greatest mutagen, to evolve under stress. So that, for example, would you say starving to death would cause you to feel stress as an animal? If you were going without food, would that cause you to have stress? And so the stress of starving causes your body to go, shit, we're in trouble. We need to adapt. Let's start generating some mutagens to change it up here. And because you're near death, that's what stress means, is that you feel stressed because, oh shit, I might die. That's what stress is for, is I feel like I might die. And so your body's going, crap, you're in trouble. Well, dying isn't good. Dying's pretty permanent. Let's try to avoid dying. Since you're telling us through the release of free radicals, mutagens into your bloodstream, that you're feeling like you might die, then we're going to try to save you by taking greater risks to mutate. So we're going to kind of try to take the whole living thing. We're going to go try to find a solution to not your fear of death by changing your biology and genetics systematically. We're going to go try to solve this death problem. We're going to take a new direction here. And so off we go to do that. Now, the body, and they've some amazing studies where we found that we genetically mutate ourselves in response to stress systematically and on a huge proven scale. Those of us who grew up a few years ago in high school never learned that that's actually what we know about biology today. So, for example, your immune system works by mutating constantly. So you encounter coronavirus, you get infected, you don't catch it again because your body has vaccinated itself. How did it vaccinate itself? Your body literally generated inflammation that caused mutagens to alter the genome of your immune system and reprogram the DNA in your immune system to produce antibodies to the thing it encountered in the environment. And you go, oh, okay, well, that's not germline mutation. Actually, it is. Turns out it was. Oops. We thought it wasn't. We taught all our kids for years it was, and then it was, nope, that was wrong. Actually, we pass it on. So when you feel stress, your body's going, hey, I'm sorry, mate. You're fucked, but you weren't going to live forever anyway. What I got to worry about is the kids at this point. So I hate to say it, but you're a chemical laboratory for trying to get your kids to survive. Because if you're older, I don't really care about you getting cancer and dying. You've done all the reproducing you're going to do, so you're a dead end at this point. What we got to do is keep the kids alive. And so to do that, not only are we going to take bigger risks to mutate in your lifetime, but we are going to pass it on in your germline. And so what they found is that, for example, people who were starving tended to produce kids who stored fat better. And it was a germline tendency. So if you came from a population of, for example, white people who evolved to live in far northern climates where there is no fruit or available food for 9 months out of the year because it's freaking freezing, and then there's no plant matter, there's no gardening to be had, and everything that's edible is hibernating. Well, then you need to store more fat to survive that way. So you're going to get your Germanic fat bald guys like me as an a selective advantage for surviving long, cold winters. But what they found scientifically is we pass those on in our germline. In fact, what we found is that not only does you may have heard of. So I'm wandering around a little bit, but brilliant stuff. You'll see. Watch, listen for it. Okay, so what we found is that our immune system is mutating constantly during our lifetime, and that some of those mutations are passed on in our germline. Our bodies producing sperm are constantly producing systematic mutations to those sperm, and it used to be thought and taught those are totally random. It's just random sperm, and it's not actually. The way sperm gets chopped up, the DNA in sperm gets chopped up. The half of your old, like half of the DNA is from the father and half is from the mother. Which half? Well, that's random. It's not random. It's actually comes from a table very much like this one, for how DNA is spliced up. So the way that a male sperm is sliced up, the way the body chooses the half that men pass on to their children, is actually selected by environmental conditions that the men are experiencing and stresses they're experiencing in their lifetime. So your dad's body, your body is sitting there going, all right, the whole purpose of this life thing, the only purpose, successful reproduction. That's what this machine is for. It's the Microsoft Windows of reproducing without dying. And so your body's sitting here going, okay, if you're experiencing stress, you might not make it. So really what I got to worry about is getting some kids out there that do. So we're going to take some genetic risk with your life to pass on germline changes that might save your kids. Sickle cell anemia, one of the fascinating ones because it's a famous one codon mutation in amino acids. It's a codon mutation. You go, sickle cell anemia is a bad one. It's a disease and it kills everybody. Well, actually, it was an immune response in African populations to parasitism, and there were parasites that were incredibly deadly to human beings, and humans went, oh shit, if we just flick one codon out of place that causes us one out of error encoding that we're going to allow genetically, then it produces these sickle cells, which, sad or bad for you by themselves. But if you're growing up in Africa, it made you immune to a whole category of parasites that were far more likely to kill you. So this entire genome apparatus produces sickle cell anemia on purpose as a survival mechanism, to survive a bacterial assault. And so, of course, sickle cell anemia in the world of antibiotics and modern medical care is bad. It's a genetic mutation. Something wrong with you if you have it. Well, it was a hugely advantageous mutation in one codon, to avoid bacterial assault as an immune response. And it was a selective one. So you could, populations that have this, if the parasitic attack ever went away, which on evolutionary scales, sadly, that usually didn't happen. So you needed that sickle cell anemia for everybody to survive in that particular environmental conditions until somebody invented antibiotics to kill the parasite, um, which in the animal world never really happens. Um, so that was a genetic advantage. And you go, oh, okay, well, the sickle cell anemia is producing sticky blood cells. So we're going to eventually, nature is going to try some lower risk experiments and we'll make that okay. Right. Octopuses have copper instead of iron in the blood. Who fucking knows why? Just need that for some reason, but okay, we'll figure that out. That's why octopuses have blue blood. There's Vulcans and Star Trek descended from octopuses, in case you didn't know that. That's why Vulcan blood's green, it's copper. Anyway, I digress. Sorry. Is it a science show? Maybe. So the funny thing that's fascinating to me is that all of the vast majority of literature in biology talks about mutation. Again, it has been changing recently. There has been some awakening in the last 20 or so years, but again, it isn't really pervaded into the mass population. So if you watch, tons of garbage YouTube ads, it's terrorizing you about the amino acids, and you got to take these things, you got to exercise, cancer, 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 cancer. Um, and so all this mutating going on actually appears to be by design, is highly regulated, is systematic, and is thinking. It's a type of this is code that at the very fundamental level is writing itself on purpose. in reaction to the environment. So it's a program that's been said, hey, your job is to reproduce. This is a program, life is a program that's job is to reproduce under whatever environmental conditions it encounters. And when it encounters new environmental conditions, it edits itself to adapt to that environmental condition while minimizing risk of death and extinction. And we're all here because this program, at almost as far as we know, and this is the great mystery of life, popped into existence 4 billion, 3.5, 4 billion years ago, give or take 100 million years, and a planetary collision that formed the moon, just something like that. Sorry. But just popped into existence in this rough form and has been self-programming for 3.6 billion years. Atmosphere changes, environment, climate changes, and solar flares, solar dimming, glaciation periods, just all that shit, and asteroid strikes, and life just keep going. Oh, well, I'm just gonna have to adjust the L-tryptophan distribution to this level, and I need to put some serotonin in the food, and then still working, still alive. Got to make a new animal for this ecological niche. And this thing, it does all of that and has been doing it successfully for billions of years with very few changes. So this program, this fairly simple program, has been the same program that has been operating that produces us and everything else for billions of years without a lot of changes, and is the same program to a large extent in an amoeba that it is in me. um, and that's amazing. You go, oh my god. I mean, it's complicated but not incomprehensible. In fact, maybe the thing that makes and again, this is what fascinates me about these things, about when you look at these kinds of problems, is that they go, it's not incomprehensible if we didn't have the human bias of going, all that mutating's bad. We hate it. It's a bug. And I dismiss the idea that there's anything brilliant going on here because it's just shitty, sloppy biology managing to survive despite all these errors that cause disease and death and through mutation. And so that biologist or computer science, that biologist mentality, which are shared by computer science, is all that all this stuff that we see it as error correction to prevent mutations, which are all bad. Not, oh my God, this is a balanced machine that is designed to mutate systematically in response to environmental stress. And it does that. And it does that so successfully that planet full of life. That thing does. What a hell of a program. Well, okay. Oh my God. There's an assembly language for life that's got 21 words in it, 21 letters in the alphabet or words in the language. I can remember 20 effing words from a new language. I mean, I'll never learn French, but I can learn 20 words. This is manageable. Well, I should just be able to, I could, on my Commodore VIC-20 from the 1970s, I ought to be able to write a program that can simulate this. It seems like why I don't need a giant complex computer for this. Oh shit, wait. See, the problem is does that little nuance about the mutations and all that stuff, and why these encoding things are distributed exactly the way they are and their relationship to each other. See, you see this chart up here is organized in 2 dimensions because it fits on a web page. But if you actually look at the chemical properties and dynamics of how these amino acids interact with one, let me find the other table I had, uh, interact with one another. Uh, it's almost, if you look at a list of all, so here are the different domains or ways they categorize these amino acids, right? They're the positively charged ones. Here are the negatively charged ones. Here are the amino acids with a polar uncharged side chains. So here are the special cases and which including the stop bits. And then here are all the ones with a hydrophobic side chain, so that they repel water. And then there's also some of them are categorized by hydrophilia. Hydrophilia sounds perverse. Attracted to water is what it means. All right. So the different, if you look at these, you go, well, that's a little bit weird way of organizing it, because they have these different properties, but all of them have all of these properties actually. This is just different ways of categorizing them. And so if you look at this, you go, it's not a two-dimensional table. The amino acids aren't a three-dimensional table. They might be a 5 to 7 dimensional table. That is, the chemical relationships, the proper um, elemental table or way to represent them may have more dimensions than we can visualize. And so the structure of their interreactions suddenly goes from being a seemingly easy to memorize language of 20 words to having hyperdimensional interactions with each other that now I can't think about. So it explodes in complexity the second the dimensions of the chemical interactions are included in the relationships with how you assemble these things. So what seemed like it was just a really manageable assembly language kind of quickly turns into a 5 to 7 dimensional structure, um, a language that suddenly gets complicated. Huh. Well, I guess it has to be because we're complicated, so it can't stay simple forever. So what else goes weird? Well, you go when you think about, and again, yeah, Science Channel. Go watch it. Look up a thing on how a ribosome works. Frickin' magic. But think of them as glorified sewing machines. Right? So a ribosome is this really primal genetic structure, protein, the kind of the first protein necessary. There's an interesting set of minimal proteins necessary to a viable cell or organism, and our ribosome's like number one. And it's the thing that can take a strand of RNA or DNA and sew it into proteins. So it takes the program and executes it into proteins. Now, it always interests me when biologists say that, because as a computer scientist, I go, look, when I write code, I take my program, which is a bunch of codons, right? And they take data in and they operate on the data and they move the data around. And so I put data in and I get different data out depending on my program. That's what I get is data in, data out. But life isn't computing data. It's not like summing a spreadsheet. It's actually manufacturing physical machines, robots. That's what we are. That's what all the proteins actually are. They're little machines doing things. So the data, the program is the data, and it's the only data. And well, now I'm going to slap myself here, but let me phrase it another way. The program is the data, and it's describing how to assemble all these machines. So the ribosome isn't executing a program on data to produce more data. It's executing a program that produces a bunch of autonomous machines. Just it's a robot making factory. And it's a robot making factory that makes robots that makes robot making factories. And again, it's just a simple table of amino acids, 20 of them in little, it's not that many of them. And there's only 64 possible codings, of which we use 20 really, plus a stop bit, which also happens to coincide with another weird amino acid that's rarely used for some reason. But 21 doesn't, it can't be that complicated. Shouldn't be. And yet, so then you go, okay, well, but it's a machine that spews out robots that make robot factories would make robots. But it's more interesting than that. So a machine that makes robot factories that make robots that improves the robots with each pass on purpose based on what the robots are needed for. So the factories like going, crap, the we're running low on plastic. Let's start using aluminum instead. So we got to adjust our robot formula based on availability of the resource we're making the robots in the robot factory out of. Got to invent a new kind of robot based on the environment conditions I'm operating in. And it does that too. And you can find the earliest form of all of that at the very core level that goes all the way back to the very beginning of the earliest origin of viable life. So, it is amazing to go somehow this thing, which clearly chain reacts into 3.5 billion years of successful life and biological reproduction, started with that just little amino acid running those little codon programs on some chemicals, and that's the robot factory that makes robots, that makes the factory that mutates successfully in exposure to all the environmental changes that happen to this planet over billions of years, and life just gets better at it the whole damn time. Freaking amazing. And now it seems like it's manageable and computable. It seems like it. Um, and actually now, so I've been going for a little bit. It's 4:57 in the morning, and I'm almost getting to the point where I can get my coffee. So if y'all like this stuff, I haven't lost everybody by now. I'm gonna wrap this up, and we'll see how many hits this thing gets. So I'm gonna go. Maybe I'll hit 16 on this one. We'll see. We'll see if I really outdid myself for going. Who were the tiny subset of people on the internet who are going, that shit is fascinating? Tell me more. While everybody else was off to the new Family Guy episode. Um, or, what did a cat do recently? So you go, wow, this is just freaking amazing. And the funny thing is, you go, out there, a bunch of computer scientists, just huge PhDs, just where artificial intelligence and simulating a brain. And the funny thing is, you look at that and they just said, look at how complicated the brain is and how brilliant we are and how much electricity we're building, making a shittier brain that can't code as well as I can yet. Um, Look at how we can spend 100,000 kilowatts on something you do in 25 watts of brain. Um, aren't we brilliant? And you go, well, yeah, I think you're going to fail at that, and I think you're doing it wrong because I don't think you're smart enough to understand a brain. A brain does not understand itself. The cell that made a brain might be said to do that. And we, as giant monkeys with brains to use to understand brains, may not be smart enough to ever really understand the complexity of our brains. And you're certainly not going to, it's like the 18th century alchemists going, I'm going to turn lead into gold because it ought to be possible. I just got to mix some sulfur in here, and I got, maybe if I heat it and under pressure. And the weird thing is, in the 18th century, it's not that they were wrong. It was possible to turn lead into gold. You just had to invent nuclear physics and linear accelerators and proton bombardment and use more electricity than all the gold on Earth could pay for to make a few atoms of it. But yeah, it was possible to turn lead into gold. It wasn't crazy. You were never going to solve it by any of the approaches you were taking. And that's how I feel about the direction of modern computing and artificial intelligence on the same question. Because you go, all of that is way too mysterious and complicated to ever be right and ever be discoverable by a monkey brain. Because the one thing a brain doesn't do is understand itself or how it made itself. It didn't do that. It's a cell that knew how to do that. And then you go, I'm trying to find the essence of self programmability and the simplest form of self programming that adaptive coding that doesn't require somebody to tell the computer what to do. And down here at the amino acid level, at ribosome synthesis of transcription of DNA and RNA, or always RNA actually, messenger RNA into proteins, you find what may be one of the most primal forms of an artificial intelligence constantly thinking and computing life successfully, and a thing that with a huge amount of computing did know how to make a brain, did know how to invent one. That little distribution of amino acids and the vast incomprehensible chemistry that operates around it figured out how to make a brain. And that was, and relatively speaking, really simple and manageable. And almost seems like I could use a computer to simulate it. I might be able to capture that, especially with my huge modern computers. It seems like I could. And this is where it got really frustrating because you go, there's a way. There's the magic is here. And you go, okay, now what then? You got a magic machine that somehow popped into existence that transcribes RNA into little robots that and the data coming in is the design of the robots that are popping out to assemble more of that stuff in all the right combinations and sequences that make life possible. And it explodes into incomprehensibility again because you immediately then have to ask the question. You go, but just, you know, in human made technology, we have to have so we stop all error. All error is unacceptable. There's nothing good that comes from error in tech. Your computers crash, your car crashes, your seatbelt fails, your plane falls out of the sky. You never go, 1 in 10,000 Boeing crashes actually improved the design. Much better Boeing we got from that. Hell, we're going to do nothing. Our engineering approach to making better planes is we'll just keep flying them up in the air and crashing them into mountains until out pops a better plane. Never happens. And so then the monkey brains that invented the world of technology that we're very proud of that works that way, then can't comprehend life because its mechanism of operating is so alien to all of our success at doing it a totally different way that doesn't tolerate any error or mutation at all. So there is no life in any of our computers or any of our machines. And we've removed it all. And so then my computer, which has had all the error, all possibility of all the properties necessary to computing organically, removed from it, and I'm going to try to use it to put them back in. Well, now I'm an idiot because that's a dumb thing to try to do. Right. So then you go, okay, well, what kind of computer is computing life? What's going on? Well, the funny thing is, and this is why I love the physics, you get into the much more higher levels, you get into quantum mechanics and cosmology at the same time, ironically. You go, well, okay. Um, well, you look at the ribosome running this little sewing machine that's going right and transcribing RNA to make robot factory, and that just happens somehow. We don't know how. That's totally baffling. But God, poof, right? Perfect. As good an explanation as any because we don't have any scientific ones that are any more plausible. We do actually, uh, but even that one, it's funny when you go, well, actually, there is a scientific premise for how life happens totally scientifically, and at the point it's so what you have to accept is so extraordinary you might as well just go with the god thing. So scientists just go, well, where's the Bible then? Fuck, what would I waste my time on science for? um so that's the hilarious thing about the the best old scientific explanation for life is so much worse that it's so much more unsatisfying that religion's appealing all of a sudden as the better answer or as a more plausible answer. So anyway, but we'll cover that another time when it's fun to go into it. But um, so you go, okay, well, this machine, we have all this structure to power distribution. We have to factories and wires that control electricity that get to you, that go to outlets that have standardized interfaces, the circuits that regulate the power distribution, blah 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 blah. Right? And you go, what does life do? Because we're electrical. We burn sugar. We basically burn alcohol. We're alcohol fueled machines. We burn sugar. And so that's why you love the things going, sugar is most toxic, causing inflammation. Well, because the sugar is the poison you're eating. The sugar and the refined sugar is bad for you. Blah, 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 blah. That's all we fucking burn. We burn, it's our fucking fuel is sugar. um, well, you had too much and it causes the inflammation. You go, even aging has a purpose. You just don't like it. You don't like the answer. But another topic. But anyway, so yeah, we burn sugar. That's our fuel to make electricity. We're electrical. So where are the wires? Where's the coal factory? Where's the supply chain for electricity, for power? And in biology, we find some of the kind of things you'd like to find, human beings we want there to be. You go, wouldn't it be nice if there was a place that you could just, that's the power center? Ah, mitochondria. There it is making electricity. There's this little generator in there going, zzz, right? Doing a little chemical thing to make electrons. And then there's this whole distribution thing. But it's not, the distribution chain isn't wires and so forth. The distribution chain is chemicals and thermodynamics, excuse me. So the weird way to think about it is that the way a cell powers itself and computes itself is much more like just, you know, taking sorry, let me try to pick the right analogy here. So um, all of life, all of just biology, because your cells and your chemistry, we're basically big bags of seawater, uh, between being frozen and boiling. And the range at which water is a liquid is a very narrow temperature range. And being liquid is really important to biology because in that range where the water is not so hot that it turns into gas, and that's too unstable to make living things, and so cold that it crystallizes, which can't compute any life, is the metastable state of a liquid where it's not a gas and it's not a solid. And just in that narrow temperature range, it's just vibrating a lot, shaking a lot. So you could say that, have you ever seen those children's toys you can get where it's a old wooden children's toy they used to make as just a ladder, and it's a little guy who climbs a ladder, and you do this, and as you go back and forth, the guy climbs the ladder. But if you just shake it, it goes up the ladder, right? There's all kinds of toys where if you just shake them, the ratcheting mechanics produces motion, control structure behavior. Electric motor. If you just put a nail in a magnet and go like that, it generates current. Just vibrate, shake it, it turns into electricity. So the heat of thermodynamics and keeping in liquid water just going there is electrons moving around and turning into chemicals, which are then shaking is transporting them to bump into other chemicals, which then causes the electron to release. So it's almost like imagine if the United States electrical grid was, you just had a whole bunch of trucks with giant full batteries on them, driving back and forth to power facilities. They go to the coal plant. They charge the mitochondria. The whole truck is a giant battery. It charges up with electricity, and then it drives to New York, and then drives up to each house and charges the Tesla batteries of each house. Goes door to door to charge them all, and oops, and that's how the power gets to your home. You go, oh, I can relate to that. That sounds reasonable. Okay, yes, except the way the body does it is the trucks are just sitting on the road, and there's a constant seismic 9 earthquake just shaking the entire country constantly, and the trucks are all just jumbling around like popcorn. And as they just jumble around like popcorn, they occasionally crash into the power factory and get charged. And then after that happens, they just, as the earthquake continues, they just vibrate around the country randomly, and a certain number of them bump into New York and bump into people's houses where they discharge, and that's how life works, and that's how your body does power distribution. That sounds like it'd work. Let's do that. That sounds more efficient, right? And you go, well, that's some crazy shit. That doesn't even make any damn sense. I go, right, because magic or biology, if you really kind of understood it. And you go, and somehow all of that mechanism of computing and power distribution works much more efficiently than anything humans make at producing thinking machines that can program, say, computers and stuff, and invent bad, energy inefficient artificial intelligence based on a naive understanding of how their brains work. Hilarious. Um, and so you go, well, that sounds like utterly stupid. You go, well, it's kind of how your cell. That's how your cells compute. Is they're just yeah, and stuff's just bumping into each other, and the entire cell is made of these probability distribution tables, if you like, of the probabilities of certain things happening, certain thing chemical interaction, certain distribution of types of RNAs bumping into each other, and the probability of these things bumping into each other is vibrating. They run into each other, and then once they get close, then these 7-dimensional chemical structure things causes them to latch together and do the right thing, and then something else bumps into them, causing them to correctly unlatch and go bump around until they run into the other thing they're most probably supposed to bump into. And then just because, total randomness is that's too much chaos, some of the random things here, we'll go back to my terrible truck distribution. And I make that terrible analogy on purpose just to show you how absurd it sounds. And when I say it that way and go, that's closer to accurate than not, then you go, well, now you understand why people really hate wrapping their heads around it and thinking that way, because it's so contrary to all of the highly ordered, error free, perfectly efficient distribution monkey brains can design, because our monkey brains can't handle that kind of complexity and can't fathom how to emerge systematic, structured behavior with that kind of reasoning. It's too hard for a monkey brain to do it. Life does it, but the product of life, which is a big monolithic brain, isn't smart enough to figure that out. So we make our systems far less efficient, but simple enough for monkey brains to understand and design. Because the idea of how you design a power distribution system that worked by just shaking everything until they crashed into each other correctly sounds batshit crazy and impossible. Too hard to think about. And yet it works. And there's some fascinating. I've talked about the change sorting paradigm for how to think about life computing, and you can go watch that video if you want to go back and see it, because this is a different topic today. Um, but so the interesting thing is when you get down to that level of interaction, you go, "Oh my God, this thing is thinking, it's reasoning, it's solving the problem of reproductive success." And then if you go, well, oh, what a relief. I found something kind of simple that I can relate to. Simple, a lot simpler than a brain and everything that goes with it. That you go, I almost have hope of understanding that thing. That I can tackle. And then you go, well, something's bothering me. Because you go, well, 100,000 proteins, 30,000 genes, freaking human genome, if you unravel it, it's 3 miles long. You just take your DNA and just, it's like a piece of thread, like a piece of yarn, almost 3 miles long. And it's in an environment it's just going all the time. Right? And what happens if you, what happens? I don't know about you, but if I'm a huge nerd, you know how many cables I have? I've been collecting cables my entire career. Every time I move houses, half the shit I pack and can't throw away are my boxes of cables I'm sure I'm going to need one day. I got my coax cables going back to the 1970s because, my VIC 20 still works. Um, so and the one common thing I always have is that no matter how neatly I pack my cables, what comes out, it's always a tangle. It's always like every Christmas. I remember taking the Christmas tree lights down, fold them around my arm, and put them away in a box. And every Christmas, a year later, you take out a giant tangled mass, and you go, just the program that we're running, made of codons that are getting jiggled through little sewing machines to make us, the robot making factory, is a 3 mile long thread. And in an environment that's going to it constantly. So this is a seismic 9 earthquake just going, and somehow, and you go, and then you just go, and life works. It's fine. And it amazes me because all the biology classes, everybody talks about, the DNA is folded up inside the nucleotide, and it's a 3 mile long thread, and da da da. And very few people go, that's fucking crazy. That would be a tangled mess. There's no way that you can make a 3 mile long thread times trillions of cells function that computes life when in an environment where liquid water is going, shaking it constantly. That's freaking crazy. That can't be done, right? And so that always bothered me because I go, and I'm imposing my own bias on the problem too because I go, I want to use a computer to solve this. I want to fathom. I need to find a way to grapple with it. And every time I try to use my computing paradigm, you find things like that. You go, that's not how a computer works. Shit, I might be clinging to an idea that's just always going to fail if I don't learn something new. People hate that. Let's resist. Let's fight it. Let's make quantum computers. Really a stupid idea, and not going to work. And so, but that's the future, baby, because all our smartest people tell us so. Give them more money. Um, so the computer, you got a ball of yarn inside a computer, inside a cell and nucleotide that's running in parallel. And have you ever seen a video? Let me see if I can find a video. I don't spontaneous. I didn't rehearse this. Let me see if I can find I've seen these before. Probably not too hard. YouTube.com. Um, see RNA, DNA transcription. Let me see if I can find. Let me see if there's some good ones here. Let me see if I can find a familiar DNA transcription. Oh, those are all CGI, but there's video of real ones. Um, Let me see. Real? Let me see. Real. Don't show me a freaking CGI video. I want to show people that we can actually see this happening because the CGI demos are always been simplified the wrong way. I can't believe it. There's nothing but CGI explanations of this. Totally understandable, but so I've seen real videos of DNA transcription where you can actually see a living piece of DNA. And the funny thing is, a living piece of DNA, you imagine it as a thread, but in a living organism, they look like feathers. And the reason DNA looks like feathers is that when you take a strand of DNA and expose it to transcription, to the RNA, all the stuff's RNA is coming and docking with the genes and making copies and peeling off and going off to get turned into proteins. Um, that's going in massive parallelism in real time. And so branching from every strand of DNA are thousands of streamers of RNA getting transcribed from the DNA. And so they look like feathers because they're all these little RNA strands getting copied off of the genes in real time. So a piece of DNA that's getting exploded, getting transcribed, looks like a feather of all these little loose strands coming from the central DNA strand, all these strands of RNA. Um, and so you look at that, you go, whoa, that's not like your science class. Here's a helix, and there's your DNA, and this is how, and here's one example of a ribosome. If you actually see it in operation, it's massive parallel assembly factory. These things spewing. If you think about the speed at which it's happening chemically, this DNA is just like going like spaghetti shooting off, just exploding with profusion in this environment that's going while it's doing that. And the RNA, which is sewing your life together protein, if you look at the speed at which it's stamping out proteins, it's faster than I can go, right? So you go, oh, it kind of latch, click, latch, click. No, life's got to function in real time, baby. That thing's going just spewing. There's spools of RNA, just protein, just shooting out of these things inside your cells in parallel at an enormous scale. And visualizing that's damn near impossible. Visualizing how that can even be happening, the speed it's happening with, you just go, I gotta, and then you gotta slow it all down and try to step through it, and then the speed which you have to slow it down, you just can't, just the brain can't handle it. And so still you're trying to find simplicity in it. So remember, you always in high school, you go, well, a DNA is a helix, right? And this thing is a neat shape and so forth. And the fact that it's a helix, you know, it was always, you go, well, that's kind of a cool shape, but what's special about a helix? Why is that special? Why is that twist there? You go, oh, well, the chemically, really what you're saying is it's got some torsion. It's got a little, the chemical structure has this tendency to have torsion. And notice, by the way, DNA's right chiral, it's called, it's twisted to the right. It would be chemically identical twisted to the left. That's how we know we're all, that's one of the ways we all know we're the same organism, is that all life on Earth is right chiral. All the proteins are twisted to the right, all the DNA, everything is right twisted. If we ever encounter aliens, they might be left twisted. Actually, there's another hilarious point. I wish I'd made it earlier because maybe I wouldn't have lost 99.999% of my audience if I'd made this fascinating point earlier in the video, which is that one of the things that is essential to life is the very fact that that fundamental common DNA and RNA structure, the fact that we all share with bacteria the same amino acids, the same RNA transcription methods, is essential to life, or we wouldn't be able to eat each other. so, so, so the entire surface of the planet and all forms of life, it can be thought of in some sense as a giant collective effort to turn whatever we can in the environment, the random garbage of the environment, into amino acids, and to stockpile them in biological matter as much as possible. Because if we as human beings went, oh, in order to make our amino acids, we just have to go eat sand. Got to go get some rocks and just chew it up and digest those chemicals into amino acids. We biologically can't do that. We are completely dependent on on all kinds of animals and plants that are in turn dependent on bacteria, that are in turn dependent, in turn dependent on lower forms of bacteria, to be made of the exact same building blocks of life, and to be out all over the planet, all over every environmental energy level and every type of chemistry, having some kind of bacteria chewing away at every rock, at every mineral, at everything that's just stone, and trying to convert it into some form of usable amino acids. So human beings were made of 21 amino acids. There's 9 we don't make. We have to eat them. Out there somewhere are 9 other things that make those amino acids for themselves that need to eat us to make the other amino acids they don't make. So the entire living system of Earth is a giant compact with all of other life to go, okay, we got a planet made of rock and we got to turn it into amino acids that we can eat. And so we all have to agree to be able to eat each other, so that you can specialize in eating those rocks and I can specialize in doing these things, and collectively we can all survive, on a large scale, and on a very large scale. So we need all this other life to be edible to itself, and so there's a fascinating contract of life for all living things in the given in our planet to be collectively trying to turn rocks into food that other higher organisms that don't specialize in making that particular kind of chemical or amino acid can eat it from you, and that we in turn are producing other amino acids that they can eat. We all have to be edible to one another. Sorry, I digress. So it's fascinating observation about a necessary requirement. Any other alien species and other alien life we'll find will probably have the same property. They all have one common origin that had to dominate the entire ecosystem, and it all had to be edible to each other in order for it to be a life form, required of all aliens. Every alien will have this in common. Um, anyway, so I digress. The torsion in DNA, right? We've all seen that DNA helix. You go, well, how the hell can you be computing with that? And again, I'm a computer scientist mind. You just go, you're saying that there's just trillions of these spraying RNA like they're looking like feathers at this microscopic scale in the nucleus of every cell, and 3 miles of thread is jammed into this ball. And again, the way they teach you go, it's got to be just a big tangled mess, like Christmas tree ornaments. And you go, how the hell can you organize a program and systematically compute with that? Well, the DNA is helical because it has a little bit of torsion, little twist. And so that yarn video I was looking at the beginning, where I grew up in Alaska, it was called Indian braiding. And what it was is you take sinews, and where I came from, they kill a reindeer or a moose in the winter. Then you dry it out. You dry out its spine. The spinal cord is made of all these long, thin fibers, and so after you dry the animal out, and you would peel thread. The Indians made thread out of the spinal fibers from the animal. That's where you got your thread from. It was strong. It was sinew. It's called. And so they'd peel long threads of the sinew. And then in order to produce rope, they would Indian braid it, which was to make long, long threads of it, and then you fold it in half, hook it over something, and you twist it. And that's one of the things we did in long winters in Alaska is make rope of fabric, sinew. You twist it, and then you grab it in the middle, fold it in half, and stretch it and snap or let it go. And it would snap into a braid, into this perfectly structured uniform rope. And then if you wanted a bigger, a thicker rope, you fold it in half again and twist, 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 and snap, and it would turn to rope, and it would produce this most self-organized, marvelous structure out of what should be a giant tangle of thread. And I remember it vividly because when I saw saw the helix structure in DNA, I remember thinking that torsion is the key to this. The entire 3 mile long thread of DNA has biological torsion. When you think about the amount of torsion it might have for chemically for something that long, maybe a hell of a lot, like a lot of twist. Now, if you think about something that self twists, you go, it kind of has to have an anchor point, something to pin it in place in order for the rest to twist, which ironically is exactly how polymerized nuclear chain reaction, the synthesis of proteins works in chemistry. Is you go, oh, you anchor one end down, and then you twist the other end with this huge amount of force, and you grab it in the middle and snap it, and it self-organizes. And so when you look at a piece of DNA, you go, inside that nucleus must be some self-organizing structure that prevents total chaotic tangling. And then if you make an Indian braid by twisting the thread, snapping it, twisting it, that's a really, really tight braid. So it balls itself up, it self-organizes itself into a nice, tight, perfectly structured ball. Really interesting. It self-assembles into a really complex, perfectly spherical shape when you do it at a very large scale, like on the 3 mile long scale. And you go, well, it's really tight. So how can this thing balled up like that and jammed in a nucleus be transcribing all over its surface? It has to be unballed up to do that. And so if you look at the way that, see, if you just observe that the simple idea of taking a string of something and giving it a twist causes it to magically acquire the property to self-organize, self-fold, and collapse into a ball without knotting or tangling. And the other fascinating thing you would see when we're doing, weaving this way, is that in order to say I want to make a ball of thread or string, well, one way to do it was just to keep twisting, and it would eventually form a sphere that was highly ordered, and it wasn't tangled, and then you can unball it any way you like. We're used to the idea of going, I'm going to make a ball of string by doing this, which then if something falls off the edge, it becomes a tangled mess. But if you ball it up by twisting it and twisting it until it just forms a sphere, it doesn't do that. It's highly ordered. But you go, well, now I need to be able to access the thing, because if it's all so tightly wound that you can't get inside or get a length of it, I need to undo it without the whole thing falling apart into a tangled mess. And so what they would do is you would, if you're making a really long piece of the string, you'd stretch it out really long. And then if you just stuck a stick in the middle, or stuck sticks at even intervals, and then let it go, not only would it ball up, it would fold the sticks all up with it into this. You'd get a highly geometrical structure of the sticks sticking out of it that were all exposing parts. So you could pull on it like a handle, and it would undo along where the stick had tangled into it, had been folded into it. And sure enough, when you look at what DNA is doing, it's got this enormous amount of chemical torsion. It balls itself up perfectly ordered without that problem inside DNA, and then or inside the nucleus of a cell. And then you have these structures called histones, which are spools, sticks that are manufactured that all have physical constant diameters. And they're placed in the DNA at particular points so that when it all balls up, they have handles. It's all set up so that it folds up nice and neatly and structured. And these sticks or these spools in it all are essentially chemical or biological little knots that form that ensure the thing has that the different genes are accessible. And one of the things I remember hearing a ton when I was first learning genetics was, oh, most of the human DNA is garbage for some reason. There's 30,000 genomes separated by just random crap. And, because nature's messy and just, shit just accumulated in our DNA for just because biology's just full of mutations and crap. And, it's just sloppy. It's not perfect like we are. Perfect like we scientists are at making computers. And so just described this Ross garbage as the introns. So during the whole human genome sequencing project in the 80s, introns you heard all the time just crash. And we don't know what they're for, and they're just wasted debris from evolution didn't clean up after itself. And you'd hear that and you go, and you perfectly brilliant scientists saying this, and you go, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And they say it with such, it's like talking to Chat GPT. Is this code working? Yes, I have flawlessly analyzed the problem. You have presented me written perfect code. Well, what about this bug? Oh, I apologize. Thanks for pointing that out. Here's another piece of code. What about this bug? Oh, I apologize. Is it perfect yet? Yes, it's fine. What about this bug? Oh, excuse me, you're right. It's the same in science. So you have these totally confident scientists just going, it's garbage. Of course it's garbage. Makes no sense. We don't understand. It looks random. Therefore, nature's just sucky and inefficient. Uh, you know, DNA, what can you say? And you go, that makes no freaking sense. There's on several levels. There has to be a purpose to all these introns. And the bigger the organism, the more of them there are. Well, if you think about it, the bigger the organism, the more encoding complexity we have in our genes, the longer the strand of DNA you need, the more chromosomes you need, and they all have to be organized and balled up nice and neatly. And you then have to untwist them to compute from them somehow to expose they have to remember that you're made of all kinds of different cells that differentiate. So your DNA contains not just one program for all of you, it sort of does, but each cell runs a different part of that program in the DNA, if you will. And I'm a liver cell. This is my part of the DNA I need to transcribe. And so, what's going on in the DNA? How's that program getting transcribed? Well, this torsion in the DNA causes them to fold themselves up into nice little X shaped chromosomes and a Y shaped one occasionally. And those chromosomes are the product of torsion, all attached to a little centriole node, a spool that they're all wrapped, and there's histones indexing all of them, so that when a cell differentiates, says, oh, this part of the chromosome or these part of the chromosomes, we're going to untangle those. Those are the part we're transcribing to be a liver cell or a brain cell, and the rest stays folded up forever because we want it out of the way, and we don't want it causing a big tangled cancerous mess. Because when you get cancer, that's one of the things that happens inside the cell, is that its structure breaks down, and the DNA unspools, the chromosomes break down, and they turn into a tangled mess inside a cancerous cell. So a cancerous cell, one of the characteristics is that they've lost their structural cohesion that makes them systematically compute. Then they start randomly computing again, but interestingly, not quite. Because you go, well, why do you get cancer when you get older? Well, it's kind of your body running evolutionary experiments on you and taking great risks because you're not going to live forever to invent something new, sort of. But anyway, we'll come back to that. So the histones, so that taking yarn and stretching, and the fact that it's a little stretchy, just like DNA is, so like a rubber band or piece of yarn has to be a little stretchy for that to work well. And so you pull on it, you twist, 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 snap, and it self-orders, self-structures without tangling. And the bigger the scale you do it, the better it works. It's amazing. Um, and then you have these structures for spools that mark the places you. And what are all those introns for? Well, if you imagine this thing that has to it's a program evolved, and one of the things Turing taught us is that there's no way to predict how long a program needs to be to accomplish a particular task. So genes have to be, by their nature, variable lengths. Nature couldn't just say all the genes are going to be in the same size. And whatever they have to do, they're only allowed to be 100 bytes each. And nature couldn't do that. The gene sizes had to be variable. And that meant that when you formed a program that needs to describe a living organism that you have to execute, given arbitrary length codes that are all going to self-organize into a highly ordered structure, you need a certain amount of padding with certain chemical properties to unfold it, keep it from tangling still, and transcribe the bits that matter, because it's a fucking computer. It's not just data, right? That cell is a computer. It's got to compute that thing. It's computing life. It's a factory that makes robots that make factories that learn to make better robots. It's a factory that makes robots that has an R&D department made of the same robots. The robots get manufactured, they go to R&D, and they make better robot designs based on the environmental conditions the factories were operating in. We got oil today, fine, we'll metabolize oil. Oh, we got alcohol, good, let's metabolize that. Nuclear material, sure, let's power off that. Light, good, chlorophyll, not chloroform, chlorophyll. Let's make that today. That'll work. Let's power ourselves off of that. It's amazing, right? So when you think about what that thing has to do to be computing, inside that cell is this enormously self-organized structure that is achieved by just twisting. Simple. You can get your head, even though it's enormously complicated. You go, oh, I could just, you can just twist yarn and self-organizes. How brilliant! What a simple idea. Uh, so that was the thing that's amazing, is that when you get down to it, you go, okay, now I'm going to try to build a computer program that simulates a cell and captures all of this. I got a handle on how it self orders, the physics you have to simulate to have that self ordering. And those introns I was talking about, right? Well, they have chemical properties to not tangle. They're anti-tangle chains of data. So they're not coding, their purpose isn't to code information. They are handles for other molecules to pull the structure apart, this self-organized structure apart, to expose the genes for transcription. They're where all the what do they call them? The there's a God, I'm sorry, I can't believe I usually just need a word on demand that you use all the time. What do they call them? They're the epigenetic handles for epigenetic transcription. So you epigenetics was only fairly came into common parlance relatively recently, because all the tools we had for analyzing cells and DNA involved blowing them up, just destroying all this stuff. So some of the most fundamental elements of computing in the cell that we need to understand get destroyed when we use scientific tools to analyze DNA. So we could never get a handle on the epigenetics that define. So when you say a cell differentiates, one becomes a liver cell and one becomes an astrocyte or something. Well, what does that mean? It means the cell said, oh, I'm going to undo, of all the genes and chromosomes here, these are the genes I need to express. That is, I need to untangle them and expose them to transcription. And the rest of this, all that other shit can stay balled up because it's not needed to be a liver cell. So you keep that bundled up. I need to undo the bits I need, and I'm going to keep those untangled for transcription, because that's what I'm going to do as a liver cell, is run this part of the program. Um, and so that's what it. And so you go, well, what pries the ball of DNA apart and removes the histone and untangles it? Well, that's what all the introns are for. That's the machinery that governs the how do you express a liver cell, so that those introns, that garbage DNA, contains immensely critical information about how epigenetics are going to expose genes for transcription in order to make something decide to be a liver cell versus a brain cell. That's what they're for. So they have enormous purpose that we still don't understand. It's total mystery, not a total, less of a mystery than it used to be. And since we've discovered the importance of epigenetics, and we are developing much better scientific tools to analyze them and manipulate them, because a lot of diseases are actually epigenetic diseases. I just didn't know that, because epigenetics are hard to study. All the little pincers and scaffolding that expose the way transcription happens. And so then when you get to and again, I've been going on a little bit, so the punchline is the cute yarn video is all about how does DNA self-organize, and how can you have a mechanism where a bunch of dumb molecules that in some simple way can somehow self-form a computer that evolves and thinks. And it's doing all that amazing conscious thinking, problem solving, writing code stuff right at the very, very basis of life. Just the basics of RNA transcription, metabolism, encoding is all in that little amino acid table. And so when you go, well, in some sense, life is made out of this magic little machine of arrangement of amino acids that can think and invent, that Santa Claus made, which is for now, as far as we know. And but that's the simplest form, and at that very fundamental simplest form, you can find consciousness, you can find thinking, you can find self-coding, you can find systematic self-direction and improvement. It's down in there. And then the elements that make up these incomprehensible complexity of brains and thought and life, is shaking things with, that's the thing that drives me crazy about people going, I'm making a quantum computer. No, you're breaking one. It's life is all, you're already a quantum computer. You hate that. You won't accept it. So you're going to try to make a contraption out of quantum devices that won't work. And you're going to try to force order on something that's at very essence of its ability to compute life, is that it relies on those weird quantum probabilities that you're trying to kill. You're trying to stop it from doing that. I want a fucking qubit, and I'm gonna spend billions of decades forcing it to be one, when obviously we're not made of computers that work anything like that. And fascinatingly, we are absolutely a type of quantum computer. But instead of life going, I'm going to fight all that Schrodinger bullshit, all that Bayesian description of the universe. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to kill it. I don't like it because it confuses me. Somehow life just went, let's use that. That works great. Let's just shake shit until we're alive. We're just going to vibrate until bunnies. That's what life went and did, right? And that works, right? And I want to build a computer. Well, let's just twist shit until it forms a ball, because otherwise you'd get a tangled mess and can't compute with that. Duh. Fortunately, if you just twist things, they just collapse into structure, order. Just twist them. Just a little twisting's really all you guys need. Just to twist it, and then shake it in warm water. Life. Uh, so, to come back to it, I go, is this a science channel? Yeah, that's all I do, right? And the funny thing is, yeah, I make gaming technology and compression, your streaming video technology you're enjoying right now. If you're on a Windows machine, right, did that with my friends 30 years ago, that's what you're using to this day. Um, Shockingly, Microsoft hasn't improved on it much, which I really wish they would on a lot of occasions. But somebody else has to come and fix the new mess. Um, so if you love gaming technology and video games and GPUs because of it, well, the reason that those exist is because people like me were fascinated and trying to use computers to understand life, and we're trying to invent computing paradigms that could figure it out. And weirdly, we didn't have computers that could do it, but the fascination with that said, well, I want to make video games. A video game is just a great simulation of physics and life. So that when you're watching your GPU render a realistic world and you're going, I'm in Oz, I totally believe it. It's an amazing achievement in synthetic life and synthetic physics. I'm fighting a bunch of other people that are actually AI bots that I feel like I have a deep interpersonal relationship with. Well, not really. You're just swearing at each other and shooting each other, but for teenagers, that's stuff. Um, that illusion of AI, of realism, so forth, is the product of an immense fascination with life sciences and with trying to use computers to simulate living things and to understand thought and cognition. And the fact that they're highly parallel is because we recognize that the way the universe works, the way reason life works, is that shaking of everything all at once is inherently and deeply parallel and simultaneous. So when you go, how does a single cell compute? Remember, we're made of trillions of cells, right? And I've got two fingers here, and somehow they are symmetric and the same shape and size. And I wasn't printed in a mold at this scale. I was grown and I'm relatively symmetrical with mirrored fingerprints, because somehow the cells that were growing on this finger match the cells growing on this finger and grew at the same rate with little or no coordination from one finger to the other. And because biology, because the universe at the temperature of water computes in parallel so fast with such a tiny fine grained clock, that living systems like human beings can grow entirely symmetrical organs and structures, without communication across the system. The parallelism of computation and physics does that. And so there is magic, computational magic, in just parallelism as an idea all by itself. And that's one of the marvelous things about GPUs are kind of unfathomable about the magic of parallel computing. When you go, well, why are GPUs sprouting AI? Because they're intrinsically parallel. And living systems that compute intelligently rely on the intrinsic parallelism of physics to do it. And the more parallel we make those GPUs, the more our stupid AI algorithms kind of work. That's terrible. The more our really shitty primitive zip compression algorithms that we're very proud of kind of work, given just thousands of times more electricity than your brain does it with. Um, and then I love the pundits who, soon as AI is a thing, suddenly everybody was an expert on it all the way back, and so those of us who actually were just yeah, that was a plan. We actually understood that stuff years ago. We just didn't have computers that did it. And now that we have computers that did it, the same shit we knew 30 years ago now works, y'all. And it wasn't a surprise to those of us who built it. That's what we built it for. Well, those of us making video games weren't going, oh, let's just simulate all of freaking physics and approximation because that would be fun. It was actually, you had to really understand physics and have an abiding passion to make a GPU work and to render reality in a way that fools a human brain. It's an enormous scientific achievement, which one I'm very proud to have participated in. And at the same time, frustrated and disappointed because 30 years later, I go, okay, I'm old, got plenty of money, I love making technology. I let's go back to growing cells in a bottle. And nope, we all that computer genius is being wasted on bad simulations of neural networks and quantum computing waste of time. So I've done other episodes on why quantum computing is a silly waste of time and offends me no end. The waste of resources erudite people are spending on a hoax. But and you all go, no, he doesn't know what he's talking about. It's just I want this video on YouTube so you can all come back to it in a decade or so and go, oh boy, we're bell bottom stupid. He said that all along, didn't he? Yeah. So sorry. Anyway, um, so I wanted to show you that my life ambition has always been to try to understand consciousness and self-programming thought. Just an amazing thing that biology seems to do, and try to get it for them. And to be clear, it's not that I want to force a computer to do it. That turns out to be a wrong idea. Turns out to be a dumb idea. After a great amount, and believe me, I've tried. And in trying and failing, I learned why. Right. So now it's obvious to me, but everybody else who hasn't figured it out yet, that makes them dumb from my point of view. Um, sorry. I know it sounds arrogant, but that's because I'm smarter. Um, no, so all the people who've devoted their lifetimes to making computers, trying to force computers to do things they can never do because they're built wrong. And the one thing we don't do is take the lesson from, let's go back to the basics, look at the biology and go, wait a minute, how's that thing really working? And oh crap, so it's not really that I want to make my computers compute life, it's really that I want to make a computer that captures intelligence and life in a way that is works, which is not the computers we make now and won't be as long as we remain sort of delusional about where human arrogance or humans bias to error elimination and to simplification to a level that a human brain can handle results in the inability to understand the sort of chaotic way life and the universe actually computes. And the weird thing about it is, you got all these physicists and people looking at, and religious people trying to find a meaning and a purpose in life from all these different philosophical and scientific points of view. And I find it right down there in that amino acid table, right down there in the ribosome, going, just it's right here. How did that pop into existence and why? And what is it about this thing that almost seems comprehensible, almost seems simple enough to grasp? Seems like it's not potentially not so complicated that we couldn't wrap our heads around it and go learn from it. And yet somehow it defies us. That's right there. Don't you see this thing as thinking? We're not an accident. This is a program. Wherever the program came from, boy, is that a good question because it seems simple, and yet if you look at all the things it's chosen from, still seems impossible, right? And I love that gap in science too. If you're looking for, the 21st century, you go, well, we kind of figured everything out. Well, except, we still die of stuff, old age and shit. That's being figured out. But you go, why do we exist? Where do we come from? What is this? Where does consciousness evolve from? And the worst place to look for the answer to any of that is in the human brain. The best place to look for it is the thing that made the human brain, which is this little ribosome and amino acid table from 3.5 billion years ago. This little sewing machine of life that operates by just shaking it, shaking it in seawater a little bit, just causes just seagulls and shit. Um, so anyway, I find it fascinating. So is this a science channel? You asked me one freaking sentence, and I got up at 2 a.m. in the morning, and I have nothing to do here but have coffee because we just finished a sprint. So I'm gonna ramble on about fucking quantum mechanics and artificial life as long as I like it, and I don't care how bored you are. Um, so was it 5 a.m., 6 a.m. in the morning? I get coffee now. So that's the hard. Yes, it's the science channel. It's the ultimate science channel because I frickin' study everything. So the funny thing is, yeah, I'm famous for being an expert in CGI and 3D graphics. I'm actually a biologist and a geneticist. But the last gig I worked before I started Playcast here was at a genomics company deploying their genomics gene sequencing software in the cloud and helping them sequence stem cells, human stem cells, and store them in freezers for all time. That was my last cool gig on the stuff, but I got back to my roots in game technology where, all the fun is. So anyway, yes, it's a science channel of sorts, but we touch it all here. We explore everything here, and weirdly, that's what I love about the game business is it's the biggest playground for computational simulation of life for somebody like me. So being a physicist and a computer guy seems to make you a gaming guy, and I'm not the only one, by the way. I've said before, Seamus Blackley, guy who made the Xbox, um, I introduced him to Gates years and years ago at Microsoft. He's off. I think well, last I heard, he was taking yeast from ancient Egyptian beer and or mummies or something, and yeah, mummy is bread stored with mummies, and recovering it to try to reproduce Egyptian bread and beer and stuff and things like that, right? So I come from a very elite neurotic set of of very scientifically fascinated people who make up the heart of some of the core of the game technology industry today, or we did back then when we were trying to experiment with all this stuff. So you find scattered around the game industry a lot of physicists. Alexei Pajitnov, guy who made Tetris, by the way, when we acquired him at Microsoft, he was building artificial life simulation of worlds. He was growing whole alien planets, plant species, and so forth for video games. That's where that kind of came from. So secretly, a lot of gamers are physicists. This is, and it makes a great way to make a living while studying the stuff you love. So it's 6 a.m. in the morning. I'm Alex St. John, aka the Saint. For those of you who are still around, thanks for hanging out with me all evening. I'm gonna go get my coffee and do something productive with my time. But I thought I would attempt to share with just the tiny number of you who might find it fascinating what is so interesting about the relationship between my passion for gaming and GPUs and physics and artificial intelligence, as it turns out, or consciousness and life, self-thinking machines, in this case biological ones. So I just showed you some of the origin of it, and I'd love to have more context, we even do more research because I haven't even, I'm reciting stuff I studied years and years ago. I've forgotten half of the thoughts I've had about it by the time I talk about it here, but it's still an abiding passion of mine. So thanks for hanging out with me. I will go do something glib in shorter form, maybe confine myself to a really succinct hour or two of rambling about Microsoft politics in the next episode. Y'all have a good morning. I'll see you next time. Take care.